Okay, this year is sponsored Lili Nishmas David Leib ben Shmuel Zelig and L'Refuah Shlema Reb Chaim David Yechezkel Reuven ben Davrush Devora. Before I wanted to start, I wanted to say thank you to the Kehila Kadesha here in Ramat Eshkol for hosting this event, and for Chazaq for putting it on, Torah Anytime for doing the recording, making this a real reality. Before I start, I was thinking, just to get everybody in the mood, on the count of three, we're all gonna enter a state of avelus and start crying and thinking about the Beis Hamikdash and just go right into it. Okay? On the count of three. 1, 2, 3. Didn't work. I see it's not working. Everyone's just smiling. You can't just jump right into the event. You have to think about it. You have to realize what's happening. Why are we in avelus? What are we crying about? What does it even mean to cry? So, Be'ezus Hashem, in this talk, I'm going to do 3 things. First of all, I'm going to try to define these concepts. What's going on in Tisha? Just Pasha, simply defining the terms. So, and then we're going to explain the significance of it. And then at the end we'll have some divrei nechama about a way of looking towards the future. It says, B'choi sivke balai lo b'dimaso alechayo ilo menachei mikol oyeveho. B'choi sivke. There's an Indian of crying, dimasa, tears. We'll get to the Menachem part at the end. But B'choi sivke, dima, bechia, dima. What exactly is dima? What exactly is bechia? What exactly is avelus? So as I was saying before, when you're talking about these type of things, it's sometimes very helpful to just very clearly define what these terms are. And when you have a clear definition of what the word simply means, and maybe the etymology of the word, how it relates to other similar words, then you'll have a clear understanding of what's the concept that these words represent. So we're going to try to explore the first section over here. The word demois, tears, bechia, crying, avelus, mourning, and try to give a better, clearer understanding. What is demois? What is bechia? What is avelus? Spoiler alert, we're going to see that all 3 of these words are related to confusion and being mixed up. And that's sort of the direction that we're going to take these ideas. So let's start with the word demois. The word demois, we commonly translate it as tears. The sharash of the word demois, daled mem ayin, appears 13 times in Tanakh in the sense of tears, as we know it. But in Lashon Chazal, the sharash daled mem ayin has a different meaning, right? Those who are learning Taruvis might be familiar with a concept called shir dimua. It's the amount that had been mixed in. So dimua in Lashon Chazal doesn't mean tears. It means a totally similarly unrelated concept of being mixed in, becoming a mixture. Right? The Mishnah in Mesachas Gitin talks about a person who damages another person by doing metame, medame, and menasech. He takes your food and he's metame, which is a way of rendering it usher to be eaten, or medame, he mixes it into chulin in a way that it's not batal, right? He mixes it into truma in a way that it's not batal and you can't eat it anymore, so he's damaging you in that way. So medame is a way of mixing something in. Right? There's a special halacha by truma that it's not batal b'shishim, it has to be batal in a share of 100 times the amount. So dimua is getting mixed in. So we have demois in Lashon Tanakh, which means tears, dimua in Lashon Chazal, which means a mixture. And then we have an interesting pasuk in Parshas Mishpatim where the Torah says, "Miliyascha v'demacha lo yse'acher." Do not delay your meleya and your dima. What's meleya and dima? So Chazal in the Mechilta, it's also Gemara, say that meleya is referring to bikurim and dima is referring to truma. Okay? So we have another use of the word dima in Tanakh. Dima means dimacha, mileascha, v'dimacha means truma. Okay, so now we have these three sort of meanings of dema, of daled mem ayin: tears, mixture, and truma. What does truma have to do with any of this? Why is truma related to tears or mixture? So the Radak in Sefer HaSharashim explains that the truma is taken off of produce when it's already in a later stage of development, right? Bikurim you take when it's still fruit, but truma, by contrast, you take off truma when it's already wine or it's already oil. It's already been processed. Okay, so the Radak says that how do you make wine or oil out of the original fruit, out of a grape or out of an olive? You take it and you squeeze it and it comes out drip, 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 drip until you have a whole vat of oil or a whole vat of wine. So it comes out drip, drip. So the Radak says just like the wine and the oil come out drip, drip, the wine and the oil that you take truma off of, so too demois or tears that come out drip, drip. It doesn't all gush out of a person's eyes all at once. It comes out drip, drip, different times at different stages. So it's drip, drip. So that's why truma is called demois, because truma is taken off of something, a produce that comes out drip, drip. So that's why it's, the connection between dimacha in terms of demois and in terms of truma. That's how the Radak in Sefer HaSharashim says it. But Rashi al Torah says something very interesting. Rashi al Torah says, why is truma called dimacha? Rashi says, Eini yedea. I have no clue. Rashi says, I don't know. Rashi, Pasuk in Parashat Mishpatim says, I don't know why truma is called dimacha. Like, what's the connection between truma and dema in Lashon Tanakh is usually tears, or if let's say you're talking about Lashon Chazal where it's a mixture. Like, I don't know what truma has to do with any of this. So that's Rashi in Chumash. But there's another Rashi, Mesachas Tzmura Daf Daled Amud Aleph. Rashi says, why is truma called dimacha? Why is it called? What's the relation between truma and dema? Because there's a special halacha, as I mentioned before, that truma is batal only in 1 in 100, not 1 in 60 like other foods of Isser. And so the Torah calls truma dimacha because of this halacha that truma, when it gets mixed into other things, it's different than other isurim when they get mixed in. So it's alluding to this idea of being mixed in. That's how Rashi explains the connection between truma and dema. Taisus on that Gemara in Mesachas Tzmura asks, what do you mean? This halacha that truma is only batal in 1 out of 100 as opposed to 1 out of, let's say, as opposed to rov or opposed to 1 out of 60, that's halacha d'Rabbanan. How can you use that to explain why the Torah uses the word dimacha to refer to truma? So some Mefarshim say that to answer Taisus' kasha, they say that when Rashi says this, Rashi meant that the Torah calls it dima in allusion to this halacha that later on the Rabbanan would institute. That's how the Beis Meir and Even Ezer explains, defends Rashi. But what the point is, what comes out of this is that demois, in terms of tears in Lashon Tanakh, also means mixture in Lashon Chazal. The question is, what's the connection between the two? What does tears have to do with mixture? So the Sefer Aksav Kabbalah explains that tears are an outward expression of an internal confusion or mixture. A person has mixed feelings. They have in their emotions. It's not clear. They don't know how to look at something, and they don't know how to approach it. So that's what's happening. That inner turmoil is shown on the outside in the form of tears. That's how it comes out. They have these inner feelings, and it comes out in the form of tears that come out of the eyes. That's how the Ksav Kabbalah explains the connection between these two distinct meanings of the sharish daled mem ayin. In linguistics, they call it polysemous. Polysemous means, a word or a root that has multiple meanings. Poly means multiple, semous means like semantics of meanings. So the Ksav Kabbalah explains the polysemous nature of this sharish of daled mem ayin by explaining that it has to do with the fact that tears are the outward expression of a person's inner turmoil, of his emotional confusion and the mixture of different possibilities that he sees inside himself. and it comes out in the form of tears. That's the Haksav HaKabbalah. And we find this idea of demois or dema in its multiple meanings. It comes up in a few other contexts. There's a Gemara in Bava Basra, and the Gemara asked about the 8 psukim, the final psukim of Sefer Devarim, where it talks about the death of Moshe Rabbeinu. So the Gemara asks, who wrote those last 8 psukim? Who wrote those? So one opinion in the Gemara says Yeshua ben Nun wrote those last psukim because it talks about the death of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't have been writing that he died if he's alive, right? So some say that it was Yeshua ben Nun that wrote it. And the Gemara brings another opinion that says, who wrote those last 8 psukim? It was Moshe Rabbeinu himself wrote it, but he wrote it b'dema. Okay, the Gemara uses this cryptic word b'dema. Okay, now based on what we know until now, we know that the word b'dema is kind of polysemous. It has multiple meanings. So what does it mean that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote these last 8 psukim b'dema? So some Mefarshim explain that when it says that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote it b'dema, it means he wrote it with demois, with tears. He wrote it while he was crying. Some Mefarshim take that approach a step further, and they said that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote it with tears, meaning instead of writing it with ink, with like a pen, he wrote it with tears. He wrote those final psukim in the Torah with out of tears. That was the material used to write the psukim. So that assumes that b'dema means tears. Some Mefarshim say that when it says that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote those final 8 psukim, b'dema, it means that he wrote it with a mixture. Okay, Moshe Rabbeinu wrote it with a mixture. What does that mean? How does it mean mixture in this context? So the Vilna Gaon explains that the Ramban in the beginning of Chumash talks about how the entire Torah is Shemus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's all names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but that the letters could be arranged in different ways, and it could be arranged in a way that it's names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or it could be arranged in a way that we read it now, the pshat, the literal interpretation of the Chumash. So the Vilna Gaon says, based on this Ramban, says that when it says that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the last 8 psukim b'dema, it means that he wrote it in a mixture. He wrote it in a way that it didn't have the pashat pshat of a story of talking about the death of Moshe Rabbeinu in the way that we have it now. It was written in a way that the letters were mixed up in a way that it could be read in a different way. That was how Moshe Rabbeinu originally wrote it. So dem in that context means mixing up. Another pshat, the Ma'or Shemesh brings that when it means that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the last 8 psukim b'dema, meaning mixed up, means that Moshe Rabbeinu was in his mind was in a mind frame of being mixed up. Usually, Kadosh Baruch Hu gives Moshe Rabbeinu a nevuah. When Moshe Rabbeinu was Av HaNeviim, he had a very clear nevuah. Right, Moshe Rabbeinu saw through an aspaklaria hameira. There was no confusion, no dross. Everything was very clear. And here, when Kadosh Baruch Hu revealed the last 8 psukim to Moshe Rabbeinu, Hashem gave it to him in a nevuah of a lower level, and that lower level is called dema. It's called confusion vis-a-vis the regular state of Moshe Rabbeinu's nevuah. So this is called a little bit of confusion because it wasn't as clear. So that's what the Ma'or Shemesh says what the Gemara means. Al Kapanim, what we see from this is that demar, demois, is not just related to tears, but it's also related to confusion, as the Chazav HaKabbalah says that tears is an outward expression of a person's inner confusion. And we could talk about bichia in the same way. Bichia, Chazal say, there's a pasuk in the beginning of Parshas B'Shalach. It says that V'omar Paro levnei Yisrael nuvuchim hem ba'aretz. Paro said about the Jewish people when they were on their way out of Egypt and they were right en route towards the Yam Suf. Paro says these Jewish people are nuvuchim hem ba'aretz. These Jews are nuvuchim in the land. And that was what was the catalyst. That's what emboldened Paro to chase after the Jewish people and then have the final showdown at the Kriyas Yam Suf. Nevuchim hem ba'aretz. What does it mean that Klal Yisrael were nevuchim hem ba'aretz? So the Mechilta says 2 explanations. The first explanation of nevuchim hem ba'aretz means, like Mara Nevuchim, the Rambam Sefer, the Mara Nevuchim, the guide to the perplexed, they call it. So Nevuchim Him Ba'aretz can mean that they were confused, they were perplexed, they weren't sure, they were sort of lost in their travels, they weren't sure exactly where they were going, and Paro's like, aha, I'm going to get them now because they're on the way to the Yam Suf, they don't realize where they're going, and then I'm going to trap them, right? So they were sort of confused. That's one pshat that the Mechilta says about Nevuchim Him Ba'aretz. The other pshat that the Mechilta says about Nevuchim Him Ba'aretz is Nevuchim is Lashon B'chia. Paro said, they're entering the desert where I see that in the future they're going to be crying in this desert. That's a good sign for me. I'm going to chase after them. This is a good sign for me. It means that I'm going to be successful in my pursuit against the Jewish people. Nevuchim means bechia. That's how the Mechilta says it. So what we have over here in the Mechilta is we have two explanations of the word nevuchim. Nevuchim can mean confusion, perplexion, or nevuchim can mean crying. Another pasuk we have is where it says in Megillas Esther, where after Haman made these decrees against the Jewish people that he's going to kill them out. So it says, "V'ha'ir Shushan navoicha." The city of Shushan was Navoicha. What does it mean, Navoicha? The simple explanation is they were perplexed, confounded, confused. They don't know what's going to be. There's this big zero looming over us, and we don't know how it's going to play out. We don't know what the future is going to be. So they were confused. They didn't know what the end of the story is going to be. Nevuchim. Comes along Rabbi Yaakov Yisrael Al-Ghazi in his Sefer Kilas Yaakov. He says, "V'ha'ir Shushan Navoicha." Navoicha is lashon bechia. That at this point in the story of Purim, Klal Yisrael recognized that their only recourse, their only hope, the only course of action they can do is to just sit there and cry out to Hashem. So Nevuchim, according to Rabbi Yaakov Yisrael Al-Ghazi, actually means it's lashon of bechia. So again, you have this polysemous nature of bechia. Bechia is related to confusion. And bechia, on the other hand, is also related to crying. This reminds me sort of an interesting anecdote that once happened to me. About 11 years ago, I was taken in the middle of the night by the Israeli army. They decided that I was deserting the army, and they put me in jail. And they wanted to forcibly either put me in jail or make me join the army. And we had a whole court case. Rebbe Kalibach from the Mir was able to help me get a good lawyer. And it came out that they had made a mistake, a bureaucratic mistake, where they were considering me an army deserter retroactively from when I turned 18, even though I had only made Aliyah a year and a half before. So it was a whole bureaucratic mess, and we had a whole court case. And so they dragged me out from jail. They put me in the court case, and the court case went pretty smoothly because we had this good lawyer, and because it was a mistake. And the military judge paskined. Military judge paskined. I should be freed from jail, right? So when you're in jail and they free you from jail, it's not so simple. What they actually have to do is you don't just walk home from the court case. This is military jail. They have to put handcuffs back on you, put you in a military vehicle, transfer you back to the jail, and then they have to do a whole processing process, I guess you could call it, and they process you, and then they process your release, and then you get out, right? When they put you in jail, they take away your clothing, they take away your wallet, all kinds of other things. So part of the processing is they give you back all your stuff. Fine. So they take me out. They take me from the courthouse, transfer me back to they transfer me all the way back to the jail. They put me in a holding cell by the jail. Now the court had already paskined that I'm supposed to be released from jail, right? But they put me in the holding cell. And there was another Mizrahi Bacha there who was on his way to jail, and I was on my way out of jail. They put both of us in the same room. They locked the door, closed it, and they left us there. I'm like, what's happening? I was supposed to be getting released from jail. You put me back in jail? What? Nothing. No answer. Nothing. I look out the window. I look out the window to see in the where the administrators, what are they doing over there? And I see that the jail wardens are all sitting around and they're eating pizza. They're sitting around, they're eating pizza. Why? Because it's dinner time. So they're on their break. They're not processing anybody who's getting released. They're not processing anybody who's getting incarcerated. It's dinner time. We have to sit down and we eat our pizza. We're eating our pizza. We don't care that you're ready to get out of jail. We're eating our pizza now. So this was about a week and a half after Purim. And, I had one son already, and my wife was about to pop with my second son, who was born a few days later. And I was Mom is crying, and this was and we just had this whole court case, and they said that I should go home or get to go home, and it's they put me in. I'm waiting for them to finish their dinner. I'm so a pasuk popped into my head. I put my face in the window, and I screamed out at the jail wardens, and I said, והמלך והמון ישבו לשתויס וישושן נבויכו. And then the jail wardens came to the window and they looked, they said, like, what's happening over here? And they saw, oh, it's just some yeshiva bacher saying a pasuk. They came, they closed the window, so they don't bother them anymore. The Mizrahi bacher was laughing his head off. And a few minutes later they came and they released me from jail, right? And Shalom Yisrael. Al kaponim, navaycha can mean crying. Navaycha is an expression of crying, and navaycha, b'chia, is also an expression of confusion. Navaycha. Haksava Kabbalah, the same sefer that I mentioned before when we were talking about demais, the same sefer Haksava Kabbalah says that crying is the same idea. Crying, demais, it's the same idea. It's an involuntary reflex to a person's confused emotions that are being expressed outwardly. He in his head, he's confused. He doesn't know what's going on, and he doesn't know how to express it, and it comes out in tears. It comes out crying. That's the way you can tell the world that you have this inner turmoil. In modern psychology, one of the precepts of modern psychology is based on the concept that when a person has these emotions, very strong emotions, and it's difficult for them to deal with it, so putting those emotions into words is magbil, it minimizes it, it constricts the emotions, and it makes it less. It makes it less overwhelming because you have words that you can express these emotions in specific words, right? And so I just heard this last night. The Moshe Shapiro said that a baby who can't talk, his only way of expressing, his wants and his feelings and what he's trying to do, his only way of doing it is crying, because he doesn't have those words. He doesn't have words to say it in. So that's the idea of that crying and demois has to do with this idea of confusion, trying to express confusion, confused state of emotions, a mixture of different things, mixture of different possibilities that could happen or that are happening or that might happen. And that's the idea of bechia and demois. My Rabbi, Rabbi Eliyahu Menachem Margolius, who was nifter about 2 years ago, he was actually born on Tisha B'Av, and that's why he's called Menachem, Eliyahu Menachem Margolius. He has a sefer called Emunas Eliezer. He has a set of svarim called Emunas Eliezer. He writes in Emunas Eliezer, he elaborates on this idea that crying stems from a person being unclear about how the future will unfold for him. Right? There's a mixture of options and possibilities, and he says this interesting point. He's a Talmud of Moshe Shapiro. An interesting point that he says that, like, when a person is teary-eyed, right, he's crying, what happens is his vision is mitushtash. It's obfuscated, right? He can't see clearly. The crying it makes it that his eyes are not functioning properly because it's blurry. He can't see so clearly. And he says that's an outward expression of his inside state of being. His inside state of being is in his emotions and in his pneumius. He is confused and he's not seeing things clearly, and that's why it comes out outwardly in the sense of crying. And he connects this also, like we were saying, to the two meanings, the polysemous nature of demois and bechia, that it means confusion on the one hand, and on the other hand it also means crying and tears. He brings a pasuk of, a famous pasuk, Hazarim bedima, berino yektzarei. Those who plant, they plant their seeds bedima, with crying. In the future, they will berino yektzarei. They will reap their harvest with rejoicing. Right? When you plant it, when you put the plants in, you put the seeds in the ground, you have no clue what's going to happen. Maybe it'll grow, maybe it won't grow, maybe it'll grow and then it'll get destroyed by the wind or by a flood, or maybe some kid will trample it. You have no clue what's going to happen. You're just putting it in right now. Hazarim bedima. You're a state of dima. You're in a state of confusion because you see so many different possibilities, but you don't know which one it is. Which one is going to really happen in the future. This unclarity is bedima. And then in the future, hazarim bedima berina yuktzar. You'll get to that state of happiness. We're on the topic of on the top of crying, I always found this really weird. Ever since I was a little kid, I always found this really weird. You go to a chasana, and there's always some people. Everyone in the chasana is smiling and they're happy and they're dancing, and chasana is like the spitz simcha, right? It's the epitome of a happy occasion. And then you always have the people that are crying, right? Usually it's like the mother of the chas or the kalik. You have the people who are crying. I'm like, what are you crying about? Why are you crying? Everyone's happy over here. What are you sitting here crying? What's this idea that some people, they cry at happy occasions? What's the idea of crying at a happy occasion? So I always found this a weird thing. And when I was a teenager, I saw that in one of the Sfarim from Rav Shimon Schwab, he talks about this. And Rav Shimon Schwab writes that this is something that Hashem put into the teva of the world. Hashem put this into nature. It's something so that people won't forget about the Beis Hamikdash. That even though you're at the spitz simcha, you're at the most joyous occasion, pitom, Hashem put it in people's brains that they start crying so that they're going to remember the Beis Hamikdash, like a zeicha l'mikdash. Very interesting idea, and there's a lot of directions you could take this idea, but that's Rav Schwab's idea. But I was thinking, based on what my Rabbi Rav Morgulis Zatzal said, that you can take it in a slightly different direction. Why do people cry at a happy occasion like a chasana? Because what's a chasana? A chasana is just the beginning. You have two people, now you're putting them together, now they're starting a family together. What's going to be with their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren? I have no clue. What's going to be in the future? No clue. So the people who are crying by the chasana are sensitive to this fact that we have no clue what's going to be in the future. Yes, right now it's a very happy occasion, but we don't know what's going to be in the future. And that's why some people are crying by a chasana. Avelos. Okay, as I said before in the spoiler, Dima, Bechia, and Avelos are all connected to the concept of confusion and mixture. Avelos is a little bit more complicated. So let me give you some background information. Without getting into too much detail, because Lamaisa, it is Tisha B'Av, so we can't get into the nitty-gritty of etymology and sharashim in Lashon HaKodesh. There's an age-old machlokes, we've probably all heard about this. There's an age-old machlokes whether roots, sharashim in Lashon HaKodesh are comprised of 2 letters or 3 letters. Menachem ibn Saruk held that sharashim can be usually comprised of 2 letters, sometimes 3 letters, and the Radak in Sefer HaSharashim, and most of us are probably only familiar with the Radak's approach, holds, Rav Hirsch goes with Radak, holds that what we call the triliteral approach, that sharashim in Lashon HaKodesh are always comprised of 3 letters. Okay? So if you're talking about the term avelus, so you have aleph, beis, lamed. If you go with the 3-letter approach, it's aleph, beis, lamed. If you go with the 2-letter approach, how do you understand that? So comes along, some people consider him a maskil, some people point to the fact that he was a dayan, and he was definitely a very, very frum person, so he was a religious maskil, but he was a very important grammarian named Rav Shlomo Pappenheim. Rav Shlomo Pappenheim, he's actually the person that the Haksava Kabbalah quoted when he was talking about Bechia, that Bechia means crying and it also means confusion. So he was quoting Rav Shlomo Pappenheim. Rav Shlomo Pappenheim goes with what we call the biliteral approach. It goes with Menachem ibn Saruk, that sharashim in Lashon HaKodesh, even if they appear to be a 3-letter sharish, at their core are a 2-letter sharish, and that sometimes 3-letter sharashim are products of a 2-letter sherish. So the way he has this whole system, he has 2 svarim written on the topic, Yiriyah Shlomo and Cheshik Shlomo, and the way he sets up his system, the letters Hey, Aleph, Mem, Nun, Taf, Yud, Vav, Hey, Aleph, Mem, Nun, Taf, Yud, Vav, Reshetiv's Hemantiv, those letters are what we call let's call it a radical. It's not part of the core shirish. You can add one of those letters to a core 2-letter shirish to make a 3-letter shirish. That's how Rav Shlomo Pappenheim, he sort of bridges the machlokes between 2-letter sharashim, 3-letter sharashim, even though he's going with the 2-letter approach, and he says it like that. So, according to Rabbi Pappenheim's system of sharashim, avelus, avel, aleph, beis, lamed, the shirish is actually just the 2 letters, beis, lamed. And the letter Aleph is just an added letter that makes the 2-letter sherish into a 3-letter sherish. So that's how Rav Shlomo Pappenheim explains the concept of the word, the etymology of the term Avelus. What's the theme? What's the core uniting idea between all the words that come out of the sherish Beis Lamed? So he has 2 approaches. One approach is that Beis Lamed, words that come out of the sherish Beis Lamed refer to mixture, taruvus, right? Mincha belula, balul means to be mixed up, right? Bavel, Chazal say, Tisha says that Bavel, Talmud Bavli is Bavel is because Sham Balas Hashem's fas kol aretz, Hashem mixed up all the languages. That's what's called Bavel Beis Lamed, and Tisha says that Talmud Bavli is called Talmud Bavli because it's a mixture of Mikra, Mishnah, and Talmud all together, and that's why yeshivas focus on Talmud Bavli instead of focusing on Mikra, Mishnah, and Talmud separately. So Balal is a lesson of mixing up. In modern Hebrew, you have a term hitbolalut, which is assimilation. You're getting mixed into other forces, other influences. So one set of words that come out of Beis Lamed is this idea of mixture and sort of confusion, and the other set of words that come out of Beis Lamed is what we would say in Hebrew shlila, negation, saying no, making sure that something is non-existent, right? Like Chazal, when Chazal refer to Isurim in the Torah, so the Torah says Lo Yisashchis, and Chazal call it Bal Tashchis, Beis Lamed, right? We have Lo Yiseacher L'Shalmai, Chazal call it Bal Ta'acher, Lo Yeroe, Bal Yeroe, Bal Yemotzei, right? Chazal call it Bal. Bal is like a lashon of Loi, do not. No, it's a negation. It negates this possibility. You think you could do this action, and Chazal, the Torah is saying no, that action is negated. It's something that's out of the realm of the possible, right? We have other words that come from Beis Lamed that relate to this concept of negation. Aval, right? Aval is but or however, right? It's like, for example, you're giving your wife a compliment. Oh, that's a very nice dress. It's a very good, very tasty food. But, so when everything you say after the but is canceling what you said before the but. Right? That's the concept of aval. So aval is also coming from this sherish of Beis Lamed, which is a concept of negation. So Rabbi Pappenheim has a whole thing where he wants to say that mixing and negation are also related to each other, because when you mix something in, it's so thoroughly mixed and diluted that it ceases to exist on its own. So mixing and negation are also related. Al Kopanim, the way he explains it, Avel and Avelus is related to mixing. Because when a person is in a state of Avelus, he's again experiencing this mixture of emotions, a mixture of confusion. He doesn't know what's going to be. He doesn't know what the future holds. He doesn't know, is he happy, is he sad, is he this, is he that? There's too many things going on, and that's why he's in a state of Avelus. Just like we said by Bechia and Demois, it's a state of confusion. He doesn't know what to do. I was thinking that maybe we could say that Avelus is also related to the negation concept of the Sharish Beis Lamed, because negation means something existed and now it doesn't exist. It's not a viable option. It's not a viable existence anymore. So what's an Avel? An Avel is a person who, Lo Yaleinu, one of his relatives was nifter, right? Until now, he lived life, and this relative was part of his life. And now that element of his life is gone. It doesn't exist anymore. It's been negated. Right? And he doesn't know how he's going to continue living. How is life going to look without Pliny? How is life going to look without Pliny? How am I going to continue? What's going to be? I don't know. He's confused. He doesn't see how things are going to play out. So that's the concept of Avelus. There's this famous expression that people say, Ein simcha ka toras hasfekus. There's nothing happy, like there's no level of happiness like one who answers up a suffix, right? You have a question, you have a suffix, a doubt, you're not sure, you don't know what's going to be, what this is, what's the greatest resolution, what the greatest joy? The greatest joy is when you reach this resolution that now I don't have a suffix anymore. Now I know what it is. Now it's clear by me. Now I know what's going to be. Now I know I have the answer to my question. I'm not bothered by this anymore. Ein simcha ka'ataras hasfekas. People think it's a chazal. It's not really a chazal. There's a sefer from Shmuel Ashkenazi called Alpha Beta Kadmisa de Shmuel Zeira, and he has a whole arichos explaining what the source of the expression of Ein simcha ka'ataras hasfekas is. It goes back to a Rishon named Rabbi Avram Badersi, who was a great philosopher. People bring it b'shem the Rambam, but it's not in any of the Rambam's known writings. But what we see is that Ein simcha kataras hasfekas, I would say the converse is also true. It's not just that hataras hasfekas is a reason for simcha, but that not having hataras hasfekas, having a suffix, is a reason for the opposite of simcha. It's a reason. It's a cause. It's a cause for avelus. Being in this state of confusion, of balul, where things are mixed up and confused. Bechia, demois, all of these things together. That was section 1. Section 2, by now, Be'ezus Hashem, I should have convinced you that Bechia, Demois, and Avelus are all different words. They refer to being mixed up, confused, confounded, uncertain. Now we have to explain the significance. Okay, we understand, we very clearly defined our terms, very clearly. Avelus, Demois, Bechia, we understand what these terms mean. What does this relate to Tisha B'Av? What are we crying about? What are we confused about? Now we have to discuss that question. What are we confused about? What's bothering us? Why are we in this avelus? Why do we have these demos? Why are we doing this bichia? So first of all, the very fact that we're asking a question, that's already a reason to be sad. You don't know why you're confused. We don't even know what we're confused about. It's like a svek. We don't know why we're confused. We're mesupek about why we're mesupek or what we're mesupek about. That already itself is a reason to be sad, to be in a state of avelus, to be in a state of bechia. The Shulchan Aruch writes in the beginning of Orach Chaim, Siman Aleph, Siv Gimel. Roi l'chol yirei shamayim lihiyos meitzar v'doyeg al churban beis hamikdash. Every yirei shamayim should be in distress and should be worrying about the churban beis hamikdash. That's what the Shulchan Aruch says. Every person who's a yirei shamayim should be distressed about the churban beis hamikdash. And what about a guy who's not a Yarei Shemayim? A guy who's not a Yarei Shemayim, he shouldn't be distressed about the Bismillah. Everyone should be distressed about why Dafka the Shulchan Aruch talking to the Yarei Shemayim. We don't have halachas in the Shulchan Aruch where he says every Yarei Shemayim should make sure he puts on, his tefillin shal yad before his tefillin. No, it doesn't say like that. It just says what the rule is. Why over here does it say every Yarei Shemayim should be distressed about it? Everyone should be distressed about it. Why is the Shulchan Aruch talking to the Dafka to the Yarei Shemayim? Says the Chidush Arim, because if you're not a Yarei Shemayim, you should be distressed about the fact that you're not a Yarei Shemayim. When you become a Yarei Shemayim, then you can be distressed about other things. But till you get there, you have other things to be distressed about. Rav Shlomo Arieli, the brother of Rav Asher Arieli, has a sefer Rabtuni Bat Tapuchim on the Moyadim. He points out it's not that the Chidushei Arim is saying something different than the Shulchan Aruch. They're both saying the same thing. They're both saying that you should mourn and be distressed over the Churban. Except the Shulchan Aruch is talking about the Churban Beis Hamikdash. The Chidushei Arim is talking about the Churban of yourself. But the truth is, if you're not distressed about the Churban of the Beis Hamikdash, it comes from the fact that you're not sensitive to ruchnias. A person is not sensitive to ruchnias. A certain person is not sensitive to matters of kedusha. So he's not sensitive to the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. So he should be bothered by the fact that he's not sensitive to that destruction, right? He's insensitive to spiritual matters because in his brain there's so many other things going around. There's all the materialist things, and then there's all the spiritual things, and then there's all the psychological things, and everything is all confused. He can't see clearly. What am I supposed to be distressed about? It's fine to be distressed at least about yourself. Right? It's like the guy, You could say it like this. The guy is too busy eating pizza to realize that the Shekhinah is there waiting to be released. The Shekhinah is waiting for the Geula, and you're just not even on the same wavelength. You don't even realize it. You're sitting there eating pizza, right? Like the guy in the jail. Besides for my interest in language and etymology, I also have a very strong interest in history and archaeology. And I was recently reading up about the Moavim, the Moabites, the history about the Moabites. One of the main god that the Moabites worshipped was something called Chemosh. Chemosh is mentioned in Tanakh, in Parshas Chukas. It says, Oylecha Moav avadata am Chemosh. Moav is called the nation of Chemosh. Right? Chemosh is the name of the main Avodah Zarah that the Moabites were worshipping. That's also mentioned in Sefer Shoftim by Yiftach when he was talking to the Ammonim. He said that, your God, Chemosh, gave you your land. In Shlomo Melech, it says that he built a temple to Chemosh Shikutz Moav, whatever exactly it means that Shlomo Melech built a temple to Avodah Zarah, whatever it means. But it does come up. Chemosh does come up in Tanakh. And there's an interesting concept in archaeology and history. It's called a theophoric name. A theophoric name is a personal name, a name of a human being, a person, that in his name is a reference to his God, is a reference to the deity that he worships, to his Hashem. Right? So we have different, what we call theophoric names, where we have a name that in the name itself it refers to Hashem. For example, Yahoi Nasan. So you have Yahoi, which is like a reference to Yud Kei Vav Kei, and then Nasan, it gives. Right? Yahoi Nadav, Ovadia. He's a servant of Ka, of Hashem. Right? So if you look in the historical archaeological records, they have examples of Moavim that also had these types of personal names, but instead of references to Hashem, they had what was called a theophoric element that referred to their god Chemosh. Instead of Yehonasan, they have Chemosh Natan. Instead of Yehonadav, so they have Chemosh Nadav. Instead of Ovadia, they have Avad Chemosh, etc. There's a whole corpus of these different texts and pottery that have these different names from the Moavim. And we know interesting things about the Moabite god. There's something called the Mesha stele, which was an archaeological inscription which was written by Moavim that talks about a certain war where their god Chemosh was a war god, and he helped them, be successful in their war. And if you look at the history of the Moavim, something very interesting happened, and we have this already mentioned in Chazal. Bo Sencherev ubilbel esa umois. Sencherev, the king of Ashur, came and he wreaked havoc on the entire Middle East, and he conquered all the different nations, including Malchus Yisrael, the northern kingdom of Klal Yisrael. He put them, the 10 tribes into Golus. And he conquered he mixed around all the nations, and because of that, we have a halacha that Moav is not a Moav, so it's mutter to marry them. Edom is not Edom, Ammoni is not Ammoni, Mitzri is not Mitzri. Everyone's all mixed up nowadays. Bilbal is ha'umais. Right? And then a few generations later comes along Nebuchadnezzar, and whoever was left of the Moavim, Nebuchadnezzar came and he conquered them. He conquered the remaining Moabites. And within 100 years of that, beginning of the beginning of the Second Temple period, the beginning of Bayis Sheni period, by the time the Greeks had taken over Eretz Yisrael, there is no remnant left of Moavim, no mention of Chemosh, no inscriptions, the name Chemosh disappears. It's not used as a theophoric element. It's not, nothing. Chemosh gone. Some historians have theorized that it became mixed up with the Greek god of war Ares, and that people forgot about Chemosh, and it just totally disappeared. But basically, when Nebuchadnezzar conquered Malchus Yehuda, who was to say that our Hashem would not face a similar fate? Just like when Nebuchadnezzar conquered the Moavim, that was the end. No more Chemosh. Nobody ever knew the name Chemosh anymore. We have it mentioned in Tanakh, but other than that, no one ever heard of it. It wasn't worshipped. It was just gone. Right? Who knows when Klal Yisrael were conquered by Nebuchadnezzar, by the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, maybe that could have been the end. That's it. No more Torah, no more Kuchabrichu, no more Yisrael, no more Raisa. That would have been the end. That could have been the end, right? Exile, if you look at other nations, exile, destruction, has destroyed and totally eliminated and wiped out all memory of a lot of different nations, cultures, societies, religions. Maybe that would have been the end of Kuchabrichu Yisrael V'Araisa. Maybe that would have been the end of everything. That could have been the end. The whole of Judaism was at risk of being totally wiped out and forgotten about. And only weird people like me who have an interest in history, would even know that there was once this thing called the Israelite religion that worshipped some god called Yud-Keh Vav-Keh. Who would know? Who would know? Right? Who would know this? Like the Navi says in the Haftarah that we read this morning, Ha-Hashem ein b'tzion. People are saying, Hashem ein b'tzion. There's no Hashem b'tzion. Like, after the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, people are like, who's this Hashem? Like, what? The people gone, the Jewish people are just, wiped out, decimated, exiled. Maybe that would be the end of that would be the end. That could have been a point in history when from then nobody would know about Hashem, nobody would know about Torah. Klal Yisrael would just mix in, just like Sancheiriv was Basar Cheiriv Bilbel Umais. He could have been Mivalbel Klal Yisrael, right? Nebuchadnezzar could have been Mivalbel Klal Yisrael as well. Mix them in, dilute them within our, and then they would disappear. Right? Disappear, be totally diluted, and then be negated from existence in Lagamre. That could have been the story. That really could have been the story. And in hindsight, of course, it sort of seems far-fetched. We're like 2,500 years later, after the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash, and we see that, we know that in hindsight, we see the story of Jewish survival throughout the ages. So it's kind of far-fetched to say that that could have been the end of everything, the end of Kuchabrichu Yisrael or Raisa. That could have been the end. But when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, that was a very viable, believable threat. We had no clue what was going to happen. We didn't know that Klal Yisrael were going to. This could have been the end. This could have really been the end. And we know that Chazaq tell us, Kol dor she'eino nivna Beis HaMikdash b'yamav, ma'alin alav ki'ilu echriva. It's a Yerushalmi, beginning of Yoma, Mesachas Yoma. Any generation that the Beis HaMikdash is not rebuilt in that generation, it's ki'ilu, it's as if the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed in that generation. Now, in the time of when it was destroyed, we didn't know what was going to be. And so, just like we didn't know what was going to be then, we still don't know what's going to be. Yes, right now we exist. Klal Yisrael exists, and Am Yisrael exists, and the Torah exists, and people recognize the Kadosh Baruch Hu, right? But in every subsequent generation since the destruction, we're still at risk of this total loss. We have no clue what's going to be. That exists. The exact threat might change from time to time. What is threatening Klal Yisrael? What we might assimilate into? What's the threat that might displace Klal Yisrael or the Torah or the belief in Hashem? But it's still a big suffix. It's still a big suffix. What is the future going to hold for us? What's going to be? Right? And that's definitely, we survived, they say, we survived the reform, and we survived the Haskalah. But who's to say that we're going to survive the smartphone, the TikTok? Who's going to say that Klal Yisrael is going to survive these threats? Right? Atheism, secularism, these are things that are definitely on the rise in a global sense. How many of us could say for certain that our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren are going to continue to be Shomer Torah mitzvahs, right? Who's going to say that the Frum society in Eretz Yisrael is going to continue to last as it has been in the previous generations? Maybe they're going to take all the yeshiva bachim, put them in the army, or put them in jail. Right? Maybe Iran is going to attack us in 3 seconds, and the whole country will be completely blown up in a. We don't know. We really don't know. Yes, we survived until now, but who is to say that we're going to continue to survive in the future? So, I was asking, what are we confused about? What's this bechia, the demois, the avelis? What are we confused about? This is what we're totally confused about. We're confused about the future. We have no clue what's going to be. Just like when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, we had no clue. Maybe Hashem is going to go the way of Kamoish, just like no one knows anything about Kamoish. Nobody's going to know about it. Or maybe we will continue. And this is there's so many different possibilities. We don't know which one is going to occur. That's the reason why we cry in Tisha B'Av, because we have this confusion, and we're still living with the same confusion that Klal Yisrael had when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. We're still suffering the same thing. We also don't know what's going to be in the future. We also see multiple possibilities, and we don't know which one is going to occur. right? All of this, of course, comes from the Gemara, and Tainus connects this. Omer Kodesh Baruch Hu, Atem b'chisem b'chia shel chinam, ani ekbal lechem b'chia l'doros. When Klal Yisrael was in the Midbar, and Hashem said, you're going to go to Eretz Yisrael, Eretz Canaan, Eretz Vaschal v'Davash, and you're going to conquer it, and you're going to inherit it, and it's going to be yours. And then they started questioning it. But there's no reason to question it. Hashem said, this is what it's going to be. It's going to be beseder. So what's the problem? Right? Why start questioning it? So why are you crying? We said that crying has to do with inner confusion and inner turmoil and mixed up emotions and mixed up possibilities. But when Klal Yisrael was in the Midbar and they experienced Hashem firsthand in so many different ways, with Yetzias Mitzrayim, with the Man, with the Anania Kavod, with the Be'er Shel Miriam, it's like, why? What reason is there to be confused? Right? So Chazal say, that's b'chia shel chinam. They're stam crying for no reason. So Hashem says, you cry for no, like a father says to his kid, you cry for no reason, I'll give you a reason to cry. Right? So ani ekbalchem b'chia l'doros. And now we're legitimately crying because we're legitimately confused. We don't see Hashem. We don't see the Yad Hashem like the Dara Midbar saw it. So for us, it makes sense that we're confused. Aleila ani vaychia eini yodomayim kirochak mimeni merachem meishiv nafshi. So that's what we're crying about. Eini yodomayim aleila ani vaychia. That's what we're crying about. Kirochak mimeni menachim. This Menachem is far away from us. What's this Menachem that we keep talking about, right? We said, Ein lo Menachem, Rochak mimeni Menachem. What is Menachem? Now we've come to the third section, the Divrei Nechama. What is Menachem? So the word Menachem in Megillas, Chazal call it Megillas Kinois, or what we call Eicha. What the word Menachem in Eicha is actually, it's a verb, right? It's referring to he who is bringing Nechama. It's a verb. Elsewhere in Tanakh, Menachem is actually the name of a person. Menachem ben Godi was the name of one of the last kings of Malchus Yisrael. Before Sancheiriv came and was Maval Bala Olam, Maval Bala Umais, one of the last kings of Malchus Yisrael was Menachem ben Godi. So Menachem is not just a verb, but it's also a noun. It's a name of a person. Chazal put the two and two together, and they say that Menachem is also a name of a person. When we're talking about Menachem in Megillas Eicha, that we want Rochak mimeni Menachem, Ein lo Menachem, is also a name of a person. Who is the person? Chazal Mesachos Sanhedrin says Menachem is one of the names of Mashiach. There's different names of Mashiach. To say it very bekitzer, there's Menachem, there's Yinoin, and there's Shiloi. And each one, the Maharal says, expresses a different aspect of how we understand what Mashiach. It doesn't literally have to mean that was his name. Right? Just because the guy's name is Menachem and maybe he was born in Tisha B'Av, that doesn't mean that he's going to be Mashiach. But the concept of Menachem, the concept of Yinoin, the concept of Shiloi. So Yinoin is related to the word Nin. In modern Hebrew it means great-grandchild. But in Lashon HaKodesh, Nin just means like a descendant. It means a continuation. So Nin means that Yunoin means that Mashiach is the solution that Mashiach is going to bring a solution that's going to be forever. Yunoin is like it's established and it's going to be stuck there. Shiloi has to do with Lo Yosef Yehuda ad Kivay Shiloi v'lo yikas amim. It has to do with the ingathering, the Lo yikas amim, that everyone is going to join together. All of the nations are going to join together, and all the factions within Klal Yisrael are going to join together. So Shiloi has to do with the concept of Mashiach being a unifier. And Menachem, why is Mashiach called Menachem? Another name for Mashiach that's brought in this farm is Nehemiah ben Chushiel. That's another name that they bring for Mashiach. Nehemiah ben Chushiel. The name Nehemiah is also related to Nechama. Menachem, Shorish of Menachem is Nun Ches Mem. The Shorish of Nehemiah is Nun Ches Mem. So these Menachem and Nehemiah and Mashiach is related to the concept of Nechama. So let's talk about what is Nechama. What is Nechama? The term Nechama in Hebrew is conventionally translated as comfort, consolation, solace. It means you were sad and now I make you not so sad anymore. you pat him on the back, you say, it's okay, it'll comfort you. That's comfort, right? That's the simple understanding of the word nechama. But using some of the ideas, some of the sort of linguistic tools that we were using before, we can parse the word nechama, the root, the sherish, nun ches mem, in a deeper way, and we can understand what it is. Nun ches mem is related to the sherish nun ches. Nun ches means noch, right? Noch means vayonach, right? You put it down. You put something, you place it here, and you leave it in, you placed it here, or you leave something in place, that's noch. Like in the Gemara, you're like, ha nicha this, right? I have a logic, and this piece of logic makes sense. Ha nicha, let's leave it over here. We'll place it down, put it here, and it's good. It's good. Ha nicha. But then I have something else that bothers me. Fine, we'll discuss that. That's nicha. Fine, that we understand. That's nun ches. Nun ches mem uproots that placement. Nun ches means you put it down. Nun ches mem means you're taking it away. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu created man, right? He created man, and he gave man the choice to do good, evil, and Hashem thought that man was going to go on this path of doing good things. And what happened, when I say thought, I mean Kibayachal Hashem thought, right? And it ended up rak kol hayom. Man had failed in his mission, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it says, Ki nichamti ki asisim. In the end of Parshas Bereishis, Hashem said, I regret creating man. Nichamti, right? It's the same sherish as nachama, which means comfort or consolation. And here, in this context, it means to regret, right? By mincha, some of you davened mincha already, some of you didn't daven mincha already, but by mincha, in Kriyas Torah today, we read that Kadosh Baruch Hu was going to destroy Klal Yisrael because of the Egel Azav. Moshe Rabbeinu was davens to Hashem, and then it says, Vayinochem Hashem, al hara'ah shediber la'aseh. Right? Hashem, Vayinochem Hashem. What does Vayinochem mean? It means Hashem was comforted, or consoled. It means Hashem regretted it. Hashem turned back. He had his decision, put his decision in place, and now he's overturning his decision and doing something else. So Rashi, in a bunch of places, Bereishis Hei Chav Tes, Bereishis Vav Vav, Bereishis Chav Zayin Mem Beis, Shmoyis Lamed Beis, Yud Beis, Rashi says that this sherish of Nun Ches Mem, Vayinochem, right, Ki nichamti ki asisim, it refers more broadly to a person shifting his way of thinking. That's the idea behind it. Nechama is a shift in the way you're looking at things, and regret or overturning is also a shift in the way. Until now, I thought he was going to destroy Klal Yisrael. Now he decided he's not going to destroy Klal Yisrael, so he changed it. There's an old question. It's a change in mindset. There's an old question that people are bothered by. But when Noach is born, it says, Zeh yinachamenu memaisenu mitzvah yinadenu. Hashem says, this guy, his parents said, this guy is going to be menachem us. He's going to, cause comfort for us, for mankind, right? So Zeh yinachamenu memaisenu. So why do they call him Noach? They should call him Nochum, or Nochamo, or Menachem, or Nehemiah. Why Noach without the mem at the end? So this is a question. A lot of people discuss this question, but the way we're explaining it now, I think it makes a lot of sense, because Noach means I placed something here. Right? Nun ches mem means Hashem had regret. Hashem put Hashem put man in the world, and then Hashem regretted it. And now with the birth of Noach, they're saying that Hashem is going to regret the regretting. Right? It's a kinichamti zeyenachamenu from the fact that Hashem is saying kinichamti kiasisim. So when you regret the regret, you're left with what you put in place. So that's why it's Noach. Yeah, you like that? You like that? Okay. Al kopanim, that's the idea of nun ches mem. Nun ches mem is overturning your state of mind. It's what they call a paradigm shift. Right? So if bechia and demois and avelus is characterized by a person who's confused and totally uncertain about what the future holds, then nechama is the antidote to bechia and demois and avelus. Rabbi Moshe Shapiro says that nechama is something that offers a clear vision of what the future is. When you have a clear vision of what the future is, that obviates the need to cry. There's no reason to cry anymore. Crying is because you're confused and you don't know what's going to be. But when you know what's going to be, and it's very clear in front of you, you know what's going to be, there's no reason to cry. You see it. There's no suffix. And like we said. Right? And so, when a person changes his mind, that he looks at something straight, without any confusion that could lead to crying, this changing paradigm is known as Nechama. And it's precisely this type of vision, clear vision of the future, that Yeshayahu Navi is coming to tell us. He says, Nachamu, Nachamu Ami. Nachamu, Nachamu Ami is saying, I'm telling you what the future is going to hold. There is going to be a geula, a final redemption. There is going to be, a Beis Hamikdash. There is going to be a La'asid Lavi. There is going to be a Mashiach. There's going to be, everything is going to be okay in the end, right? Oid Yeshua is the kingdom, is everything is, it's going to be okay. And it's a Navi speaking. It's clear. That's this nechama that we're trying to get to, right? That's the Chazal tell us. I wrote a whole essay about this once. But Chazal tell us that lo yahayu lahem liyisrael yomim tovim k'chamisasar ba'av v'yom kippurim. We don't have any yomim tovim that are as happy for Klal Yisrael, except for that are more so than Tes Vav Av, Chamishasar ba'av, and Yom Kippurim. Right? Chamishasar ba'av always falls out, the same week that we read Nachamu, Nachamu Abi. It always falls out the same week of Shabbos Nachamu. Right? And we said before, Ein Simcha Kataras Esfekas. There's no greater happiness than not being in a state of confusion, being pulled out of a state of confusion. When we get that Nachamu, Nachamu Ami, that's Ein Lo Yom Tov Yisrael Chamishasar ba'av. We're looking for that shift in mindset. That's the nechama. The Navi is saying, look, it's still the same. The same facts remain on the ground. The same facts remain. You're still in the same situation. You're still in the same galus. But we have a clear vision of the future. You can already be happier. You can already be less bechia, less demois, less avelus. I saw a very interesting thing once in the Tamia Minhagim. It brings from the Kedushas Levi that the Kedushas Levi says that in the future, in the Messianic era, on Tisha B'Av, we're still going to read Megillas Eicha. We're still going to read Megillas Eicha. But it's going to be with a different mindset. Instead of reading Megillas Eicha with the niggin of Eicha, for the Litvaks, we're going to read Megillas Eicha with the niggin of Megillas Esther. Eicha Yashua Badad. It's not going to be like, oh, how did this happen? How could we Yashua Badad? Hayir Basi Am. We're going to read it. It's going to be like Bitmiah. How was it that there was such a thing in the distant past, that there was such a Metzias, that Klal Yisrael was in this state, in this desolate state? It's the same facts. It's this. You're living in the same goals, but it's a different mindset. That's what nechama is. Be'ezus Hashem, we should merit to fulfill the vision of Yeshayahu Navi and Zechariah Navi and all the Nevi'im that are telling us about the future, where Kadosh Baruch Hu is going to mahapech all the sad days into happy days. And we should see the coming of Mashiach b'meher v'yameinu amen.